So you want to learn to crochet. Throughout the series, we're going to talk about everything you'll need. We'll talk about yarn, yarn needles, hook sizes, and then we're also going to go into pattern reading, granny squares, amigurumi, anything that you wanted to know. We're going to go through step by step. So let's get started. The first thing that we're going to talk about is yarn. I am assuming that you know nothing about crochet. You don't know where to start. You have no idea what kind of yarn to buy. So I'm just going to help you out a little bit. When you're first starting, I highly recommend the weight 4 yarn. Most of the patterns that you start with are probably going to be this yarn. It's the most accessible yarn. And when we go through the next episode where you start actually doing stitches, this is the yarn I want you to get to start with. So in the next episode, you're going to make sure you have at least one skein of yarn. It doesn't matter what color. And we're going to do a 4 weight. Now let me show you about these labels because this gets really confusing. And if you choose the wrong type of yarn for the pattern you're doing, you could end up with something either totally huge or totally small. You have to have the right hook. It gets very confusing. So we're going to just break it all down. Now, first with the label, this particular yarn is Big Twist. This used to be at Joann's. I think Michael picked it up. I don't know because there is no Joann's at this moment. But let me show you how to read the label. When you're picking out yarn, this is the weight. So whenever you have a pattern, it should tell you the weight of yarn to use. 4 is a pretty standard one, and most of them will say 4. So it'll say either 4 or medium, but usually one or the other, usually 4 or both. The next one is the hook. I am not going to go over knitting, so we're just going to ignore that because I do not know how to knit. Maybe someday, if you ever want to take up knitting, that would be that info. This has a crochet hook, so that is what we are looking for. Now, what this number is around the edges, these two numbers right here are the gauge sizes. So if you were to do 13 single crochets, 14 rows, you would have a square that is 4 by 4 inches if you use a 5 millimeter hook. Okay, so this information right here, it gives you all of that in this little tiny box. So a lot of times the patterns will have a gauge, what your gauge swatch should be, and this is the information that they're going to give you. I'm in the United States, so I'm not going to cover centimeters and stuff like that. But so you would have 14 rows of 13 stitches, and it would measure 4 by 4 inches. Okay. And now the next thing it usually has is it will have, this gives, some of them have examples of what you can make just with this skein or how many skeins you need. Like you would need 3 to make a sweater, 1 to make a hat, 1 to make a scarf. It's basic, may or may not be, but then they'll also have washing instructions on them. It'll also tell you what it's made out of, so you can get a lot of information. One of the other important ones when you have a pattern is yardage, because sometimes they'll say you need red yarn, you need 500 yards. So if you were buying this skein, you would need 2 to get to the 500 yards. So that is the other thing. Some will have ounces, some, it depends on your pattern. So just pay attention to what the pattern says and what you're looking at on the label. I'm going to show you a different type of yarn. This is a super bulky yarn. We're going to look at this pattern, this label. Okay, so you see here it says 6, super bulky. I'm trying to see what it looks like. I don't have my readers on. Okay, so over here it has the same information. So you would say 8 rows, 7 single crochets, you would have a 4 by 4 inch square. Okay, it recommends an 8 millimeter hook, USL/11. Now, what does this mean? You're probably wondering. We're going to get into hooks in just a second, and I will come back to these skeins of yarn to show you. So here is the washing instructions, and then it reads it out right here. Here is what the yarn is made out of. Here's the weight of the yarn. Here's how many yards are in this skein. Okay, so that's all very important information that you're going to need whenever you start your first project and you are using a pattern. Now we will talk about the hooks. So this particular yarn it recommends a 5 millimeter hook. Now, if you look down here, it says USH8. What does that mean? Well, I will show you here. This is a pretty standard hook. This used to be very popular back in the day. This was all the hooks that you could pretty much find. They look like this. And if you look on it, trying to see if you can see it, it says H8 5.00 millimeters. So this is a 5 millimeter hook. I'm really sorry for my fingers. I have psoriasis. I probably say that in every video, but it's a 5 millimeter hook. And this says 5 millimeter and H8. That's what that is. So your hook size, if you have a hook, oops, it will either say 5 millimeter or H8. Now these hooks here, these are the type of hooks that I get now because I feel like they're soft and I can use them a lot. So I get hooks like these and I get them really cheap on Amazon, and you can't see. Let's see if you can see there. So that this is it says just says H 5 millimeter. Okay. So see it says H8. So if you're looking, if it only has H8, you know this is it. If it only has 5 millimeters, you know this is it, because some of them do not even have an H. It'll just say 5 millimeters. You never know. You just get it once in a while. But this, looking at the yarn, it pretty much tells you, and usually the patterns will tell you too. And if you have one that doesn't have any of them and your pattern doesn't say, just look it up online. There's a lot of sites out there that'll give you that information of what kind of hook you're using. Now, as far as hooks, if you're a beginner, I highly recommend buying a little kit like this. I get these off of Amazon. This particular one, I believe it was for larger size hooks. This hook is pretty large. And these little kits, I mean, you can get them around $12 to $14 in the US. They'll come with a bunch of hooks. Okay, this one, I already took the stuff out of this one. They'll come with a bunch of hooks. They usually come with some needles. It'll either be like this kind of needle or this kind of needle, and they'll also come with some stitch markers. These are all very important. Sometimes they'll even come with little scissors. So getting one of these, make sure it has a 5 millimeter hook inside of it, because that'll probably give you a lot of hooks that are good sizes for starting out. As far as the hook sizes, hooks come in a lot of sizes. And this particular one, this is a 8 millimeter. So this one is recommended for this type of yarn, this super bulky yarn. But if you were making an animal or something like that, maybe you'd want to go down a size. We'll talk about that later as we get into crocheting other things like granny squares, amigurumi hats, whatever. We'll start talking about why you would need to go against the recommendations and use what the pattern tells you, because sometimes the pattern is not the same as the recommendations. It's very important. So this is a pretty standard size. It's a 5 millimeter. But then you can go down to tinier ones. This is a, see if I can see it, 3.5 millimeter. This would be more for amigurumi, making little tiny dolls. So you have different types of hooks. You have some hooks that have handles, some that are just like this. So it just depends on what you want, but I would get a little kit that comes with a little carrying case. Then you're going to have needles. Now these needles I like for the big chunky yarn because it's really easy to get the yarn inside of the needle. You're going to need needles because you're going to need to weave in your ends when you're done. This type of needle is my favorite. I use this for the regular size yarn, this size. It's kind of hard to get in there, but you do get used to it. You can use a sewing, what do they call those? Sewing threader. Yeah, sewing threader. You can use that, but I just kind of stick it in with my nail and pull it out. This is my favorite just because it's really sturdy. It's really slick. It doesn't catch on the yarn. A lot of the kits come with a plastic one. These are okay. These are okay, but sometimes I find they have little things on it that catch on the yarn, or I don't know, I just don't like the feeling of it. They're very flimsy. This one, you can really push it through something, which is really good for amigurumi. This one, if you're just doing sweaters or something, this should be fine. I'm kind of picky with those. Now, stitch markers, you're going to need stitch markers, especially when you're starting out, because one of the things that beginners usually have a problem with is counting their rows, and their stuff starts to get lopsided. Maybe they're making a scarf, and you'll see your rows will go like this. So one side will go straight and the other side starts to curve in. That's because you're skipping a stitch on the end or the beginning. It gets kind of confusing, but if you have stitch markers, you can always count. I usually recommend doing it for like every 10 stitches. You'll have a stitch marker. So if you need to count your stitches, it's very easy to do. After a while, you won't have to do that, but usually I still use stitch markers to mark the beginning or the end of a row, just so I know where I'm always at. For scissors, I like to use teeny tiny scissors with a sharp end, like meaning it goes to a sharp end. If you just buy regular scissors, usually the ends are more rounded. I like sharp ends because when you cut down, I get really close, like this close. Like that's how close I get when I cut. And you want to make sure you don't cut the fabric, you just want to cut the tail that you're pulling out. And so I just like to have really sharp ones that have a little point on it so you can get really close to material. You don't need them. You don't need these tiny scissors. Sometimes like these little kits will come with ones and the top might be a little rounded. This is just what I prefer, but you can use anything you want. But you will need scissors. The needles are for weaving in the ends, like, you can kinda see some of these. This is a backside, like, this would probably go on a purse or maybe a blanket that you just didn't you didn't look at one side, maybe it's for decorations or cuddling, but, but you would weave in the ends or use it to make little decorations like these. Use needle for that. You definitely need a good needle. At some point, you're gonna need a pattern. There are many different types of patterns, and it really just depends on what you wanna crochet, but we'll go over patterns, we'll go over how to read them and all that stuff in episodes to come. The last thing I wanna talk about is measuring tapes. Are you gonna need a measuring tape? You might not. You might not need one for a while. You might come to a pattern that says you need 24-inch cut of, different colors of yarn for whatever. I've done that for hats that have the little things hanging down that you braid. Those patterns require you to do a measurement. Sometimes there are patterns that you crochet based on length, like my chicken slipper pattern. That pattern is by the length of your foot, so it doesn't really say how many stitches you have to do. It'll tell you how many inches you need to do. So, it is kind of important to have one. You won't need one right away, but you wanna keep an eye out. You can usually find this type of measuring tape in the sewing section. This particular one is made out of some sort of plastic. Sometimes they come in fabric, but, you can find it in the sewing section, or you could just get one off of Amazon. They're not that expensive. So that was all I wanted to talk about in this episode. I just wanted to go over some items that you need. In the next episode, we're going to learn how to do a chain, and we're going to learn how to crochet in that chain, and we're going to learn how to do single crochet, double crochet, maybe even some other ones. So you're going to need a 5 millimeter hook. You're going to need one skein of 4-weight yarn. Okay, so it could be this is a Red Heart Super Saver. Doesn't matter what color. You can pick any color you want as long as it's 4-weight. This is what we're going to start out with. So grab a skein of yarn, grab a hook, and you're going to need a pair of scissors, and you're going to need one needle, which I recommend either this or the plastic one. So hit subscribe, and I will see you on the next episode. I look forward to seeing you there. Bye.